Every single day. Good morning. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Hope you're all fit and well. I wish you could see my office. Oh, I wish you could see my office. I have so much room. So much room. Had a good tidy up yesterday. It's occurred to me that I think I must tidy up in here about once a year, which is not great. I mean, I do clean. I promise I do clean. I hoover the floor and stuff like that. But stuff piles up. Bits of paper and documents and stuff piles up. Finally got rid of it all. Turns out carpet in here is blue. Yep, rediscovered that. Rediscovered a few hats that I didn't know we had. A couple of other prizes that we'll be giving away in the run up to Christmas. So yeah, it's looking very spick and span. All for a purpose. I've got a couple of videos that I'm working on where I want to change it up a bit. I don't want to just be sat here talking into this microphone and into this camera. I want to do something a bit different with it. So the plan basically is to film from that angle over, well, I know you can't see it, but over there, and film this way so you can actually see. You'll be able to see my setup, such as it is. You won't be able to see the camera because you get the idea. Anyway, loads to get through today, but I do want to start with the Health and Safety Executive. They've published their annual accident report today. Let me show it to you very quickly because I want to take 2 bites of this. Let me have a look. Here we go. So this is the bit that always gets the headlines. This is a countdown of the fatal injuries at work during the period 2024 to 2025. And as is generally the case, construction is at the top of the table. Nothing to be proud of there, nothing to be proud of whatsoever. I've been struggling to find last year's figures. I'm fairly sure that the fatal figures for last year were 30. They're 35 this year, so we're up a bit. Incidentally, while I'm talking about this, I've had email newsletters through today from Construction Buzz and also from Construction Index, I think it is. Neither of which have mentioned these, but that's up. We'll get on with that anyway. So yes, fatal injuries up to 35. Terrible. They've also broken it down by age, and apparently it turns out, which is a strange way to do it. Apparently, most of the fatal accidents generally are aged between 16 and 59. Seems like a bit of a broad one, doesn't it? And the main kinds of fatal accidents for workers, and again, this is across the board. Falls from height, struck by a moving object, trapped by something or collapsing or overturning, struck by a moving vehicle, contact with moving machinery. So, the usual suspects. Okay. Let me take that off the screen because just very quickly, construction is a big employer. I'm not condoning these figures whatsoever. In fact, the opposite. I'm decrying these figures. I think that 35 people dying in the demolition and construction industry in a single year is a disgrace. We should all hang our heads in collective shame. Okay. What I would say though is construction is a massive employer. I think last count 2.5 million people employed. So yeah, I'm not suggesting for one moment that we should do this on law of averages, but yeah, the law of averages, if you employ 2.5 to 3 million people in a hazardous industry, the chances are you're going to have a higher instance of fatal accidents. Bear that in mind. Riddle me this. This is the rate of self-reported work-related ill health by industry for people working in the last 12 months. And this is per 100,000 workers. So this is illness that's been self-reported. Bear that in mind. So the very top, public admin and defence, then human health and social work, then education, then other activities, then arts and entertainment, then water and sewage and waste, then information and communication, then transportation and storage, then admin and support services. I don't know how you go about injuring yourself or contracting ill health from admin, and there, construction, all the way down. All the way down. Where are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th. 10th in the league table for self-reported ill health. Okay, hold that thought. We then go down to rate of self-reported non-fatal workplace injury by industry. Again, this is over the last 12 months, and it's per 100,000 workers. Accommodation, food service, number 1. construction second. Oh, are we not reporting everything? I've just realised you can't even see this. I'm going to show it to you on the screen. Bear with me 1 second. There we are. Just to prove that I'm not actually making these figures up. There is the figures for self-reported work-related ill health, where construction is number 10. Now, bearing in mind all of the potential ill health you can pick up during, obviously, the usual things like, influenza and the common cold and stuff. But you think about breathing in dust, respiratory problems, coming into contact with toxins and that kind of thing. And yet construction is number 10 on self-reported work-related ill health. It is also not at the top of the table for self-reported non-fatal workplace injuries. So in the area of fatal injuries, we are far and away the worst. Far and away the worst. But when we have to actually report an injury rather than a fatality, we're number 2, even though we probably employ more than pretty much any of the other industries combined. Yeah. Now, I'm going to go over to the chat. Let me take that away now that I've rectified that. Ken Hatcher says, yes, the rest get paid off. Get paid when off, but construction, we don't get paid. Yeah. Well, there's 2 ways of looking at that. My first thought, because I'm a cynical bugger, my first thought was they've been paid off. In other words, those injured or those suffering from ill health as a direct result of their work have been bunged a few quid to keep it on the low down. Or, as Ken has rightly said, with the levels of self-employment and the gig economy that seems to proliferate in the construction industry, you could report it. You could take time off work, but if you do, you don't earn any money, so you soldier on. Yeah. There you are. I'm going to say good morning to Ken Hatcher. I've already included in there. Mick Norton's just joined us. Good morning, all. Gary Muirhead says, do they include figures for people taking their own lives due to construction and ones going to work? They do not. They do not. I know people like Steve Kerslake over at Construction Sport and Andy Stevens, who's been a guest on the show before. I know they are pushing for workplace suicide to become a riddle or incident. It's a funny one. It's a funny one. As Jim rightly says, if they have Gary, they shouldn't have. Same as anyone that's off themselves at work shouldn't be marked down as an accident. No, it's not an accident, but it's a work-related incident. Now, well, there I think is where the problem lies. Is it work-related? However, what I would say is all the time that we're not accepting the fact or investigating whether it was actually work related or whether, the person taking their own life has got other broader issues, domestically, addiction, whatever it might be, whatever their reason for taking their own life. But what I would say is we should be investigating. Now, whether it's classed as a riddle, whether we actually note it down as one of the causes of death within the industry, but I do think it should be investigated. I think if what is the figures? 550, 600, whatever it might be per year, industry suicides. If we were to investigate and we discovered that actually the rate of suicide within the industry was in line with the rest of the country. In other words, young men do have a nasty habit of killing themselves for a variety of reasons. We might be able to actually point it and say, well, it's just the fact that we employ 2.5 million men. The law of averages, across the board dictates it wasn't actually related to the work that they were doing. But until we investigate that, we don't know. It might be that the industry is causing people to kill themselves. It might be nothing to do with it. But unless we actually look into it and ask the questions, we will never know. I'm not saying it doesn't warrant an investigation, says Jim, but it's a totally separate statistic. Well, interestingly, can I still get that? Bear with me a second. No, I've switched it off. Interestingly, the fatality figures always separate out things like asbestos-related diseases, which kill people in their thousands, but they don't include it. So they have the capability to have kind of a subset of death. Could we not have another subset of death for those that have taken their own lives during the course of work? There you are, Ken Hatcher. That point, that right there is precisely the point. I've got to use a holiday to go to the doctor, so I don't bother. Yeah. Now, the last time I saw Ken, he was looking in fine health. But how long can you do that? And the older you get, the worse your health is going to get. That's the nature of the beast. How long can you do that? I'm not going to ask you to tell me your age, Ken. You're younger than me, I'm sure. How long can you go without seeing your local quack before actually things start dropping off or failing to work? Yeah. Hold that thought. We're going to. I'm sure we can talk about that a bit later on. And there you are. Ken is actually 56 years old. He actually looks younger than that. The swine. Yeah, I've got 4 years on you, Ken, and you're looking well on it, my friend. So long may that continue. Speaking of ill health, I don't know if Peter's here today, but Peter is really struggling at the moment. So if anybody's got a spare 5 minutes today, maybe give him a bell or drop him a line over on WhatsApp. I'm the same. I can only get to the doctor on day off as they're not available on a Saturday. Yeah. There's Chris Ford. Morning, all. Why do lorries turn up just as you're having a break? Because they'd hate you. Because God hates you. That's the way it works. And there's Ken. Ha ha. Thank you. You're very welcome, Ken. Particularly today, I think you're looking extremely fetching. If this was a two-way camera, I dread to think what I'd be looking at right now. But there we go. Without further ado, let me roll the intro and get this, whatever this is, on the road. It is Tuesday, the 25th of November, which means tomorrow is my sister's birthday. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition, the Lord High Chancellor of live streaming. In today's show, Caterpillar's next generation ADTs roll out, taking the latest case backhoe loader for a spin. LiuGong's 20-tonner electrified, and Mammoet perfects the art of zero emission lifting. And in today's morning monologue, meet your AI co-pilot. Yeah. Been giving it a lot of thought. Now, I have done things slightly out of order. I probably should have done that HSE thing as our news item, but what I am going to do instead is tell you about this. I do need to get this up on my screen, and I haven't done it because I wasn't planning to, basically. About maybe a week, possibly even 2 weeks ago, possibly 2 weeks ago, Chris Ford tipped me the wink that the scrap metal company, Unimetals, who bought Sims not so long ago, was going down the toilet. He'd heard it on the grapevine. Turns out he was absolutely on the money, and I can prove that to you right now. Here we go. There we are. This is on Demolition News. .com right now. Metals recycling firm Unimetals Recycling, one of the largest metal processing businesses in the UK, filed a petition for compulsory liquidation. Decisive action places approximately 650 jobs at risk across its nationwide operations. The company, which operates 27 sites across the UK, is expected to begin winding down as soon as today. Apparently, the liquidation follows unsuccessful attempts to find a buyer and secure new financing. Unimetals has faced escalating liquidity challenges, whatever that is, throughout 2025, which were compounded by a high supply of excess scrap and steel earlier in the year, which dented prices. I realise the scrap price does move up and down, and sometimes it goes in your favour, and sometimes it goes the other direction. But the first thing that flashed into my mind when I read that was one of the many key criticisms of Donald Trump is he is one of the few people in history to have had a casino that lost money and basically went bankrupt. How do you go bankrupt in the scrap metal business? Surely the answer, very simplistically, is if the price is down, well, sit on it then. Just sit on the scrap until the price goes back in your direction. As I say, I realise I'm oversimplifying things there. I've never run a scrap metal company, and having seen that, I'm even less inclined to. But yeah, it does seem very odd that people can lose money doing that. Let's have a look. Gary Muirhead. I'm not going to read that out. I'll just leave. Chris asked why lorries turn up when you're having a break, and Gary Muirhead, very forthright in his answer. Mick Norton says the historical reluctance to report related injuries is still down to the fear of unintended consequences imposed by Luddite employers. Yeah, I'm afraid you're right. And listen, the tales I've been told, and I don't get told anywhere near the full story, but the number of times I've been told about people that were injured at work, bunged a few quid to keep it on the QT, and then subsequently were injured again, or in one instance that is in my head, they actually went back to work and died. Yeah. You wonder how things can go wrong so quickly. Yeah, and bearing in mind, you would have thought that a global company or a hedge fund or somebody would have come along and said, actually, we'll bail you out. We can get this in major scrap company at a marked down price. When the steel price goes back in our favour, we will be happy as Larry. Seems odd. Chris Full says, when you overborrow, it doesn't matter what business you're in, the results are the same. That is certainly true. Andy Darvell, morning. He says, can't join in today, lifting in some rather large pipes. Have a look on the group for photos. I will certainly do that, Andy, which is a shame because we are actually doing a bit of lifting at the end of the show. Yeah, we really are. Well, the end of the proper bit of the show. The end of the actual show is weeks away, that is. So, as I've screwed up the order of business, I'm going to play you a bit of Caterpillar now. They're next generation ADTs, to be precise. And this is what they look like. We're going back to the story about Unimetals. Jim follows up with, because with borrowed money, you can't afford to sit on it. Fair comment. Same as machines that are on the monthly, you can't afford to sit them in the yard. That's what sparks the race to the bottom with higher rates. True that. Garvin over at Mostly Diggers is on the same subject. Monthly costs and payments that have to be met, such as rent of the large yards, machinery, trucks, maintenance, parts, tires, fuel, electric staff, insurance, and plenty more. All those costs are rising also. Yeah, all very, very true. But you would have thought, again, I'm oversimplifying here. If you have 27 yards filled with scrap steel, you would have thought that somewhere in the world, and bearing in mind, we are talking about a global commodity in steel and ferrous metals and that kind of thing. You would have thought that somebody over, maybe even in China would have gone, oh yeah, we'll have a piece of that. They didn't. I understand they did actually get very close to securing a buyer, and then they bailed at the last minute. I don't know whether they bailed because they didn't like what they were seeing, or because they too couldn't make it work. We may never know. Andy Darvell says, I'll be watching. Good, but can't text much as rather busy. 3.5 ton pipes with nearly 6 ton ends, making a tank in case a pumping station fails. Not lifting at the moment as they are leveling one up. Well, okay, well, we'll rush-ish, I would say. We'll get to the Mammoet part of the show just as soon as we can. But first of all, we need a bit of this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Yeah, we're going to go out for a bit of a spin with the new Case 580 backhoe loader, the Evolution. The guy that's doing the introduction, quite Italian, but the machine, pretty damn smart. Take a look.
SV Evolution is backed up by a full range of case service solutions, including extended warranty and planned maintenance packages, fluid analysis, maintenance kits, and connectivity tools. Customers can also benefit from My Case Construction, a dedicated app and portal that goes beyond traditional fleet management. This solution transforms the way customers interact with their equipment, operators, and dealers, helping them to make informed business decisions and maintain control over operational costs. The app also offers insights, job site management tools, and performance reports, all accessible in one place. With Case, connectivity and intelligence come together to drive your business forward, maximizing efficiency in every step of the way.
There you are. Going back to this talk of Unimetals, which is the story of the day, I would say. They might have bought Sims for the actual sites, then transferred the property to another firm, and then fold the business, only going pop on paper. It doesn't sound like that. One of my first thoughts when I actually saw that, aside from the Donald Trump comparison, was I wonder if the Sims purchase had overexposed them. I did try to find the figure that they bought Sims for, couldn't find it, but it would have been probably in the hundreds of millions, and I wonder if they overstretched and didn't get them up the return. We're going to do this. We've borrowed the money. We're going to do this, but don't worry because we've got all of this scrap coming in, and we'll be absolutely fine. And then the price turned against them, and that's how we ended up where we are. Don't know. I'm sure it'll all come out in the wash. It's very, very fresh news. Dan says, makes you wonder. No one has a backup, and no one steps in to help. Yeah. Not sure about stepping in to help, although I have to say, I do think one of the, and I'm not blaming anyone for this, I do understand it, but I do think one of the saddest things is, I was at the Institute of Demolition Engineers event on Friday last week, and despite the fact that everybody in the room were rival individuals, rival companies, they're competing, fighting tooth and nail for every last demolition job, but they can come together and set aside their differences for the greater good and so on down the line. The best way to find yourself outside that circle is for your company to suffer financial difficulty. It's almost like you become a pariah, a social leper. Your company takes a bad turn or possibly goes under. And despite the fact that you've bounced back, you may have paid off all your creditors, you may have been completely honourable throughout, but you do find yourself kind of ostracised. And I would imagine that's a very, very difficult place to be. Dan says sometimes competition can have consequences for others on workers and family. Yeah, ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? Right. Okay. What do we got next? Oh, I know. We're going to go LiuGong. We showed you their electric mining truck yesterday. We're going excavators this time. Still electric, but excavators. Back after this.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
Yeah, 20-ton electric excavator. That's a thing. I watched that last night, and there was part of me was tempted to put some music on the first part, but the more I watched it, the more I thought actually that gives you a real feel for the silence or the relative silence in the cab. So yeah, fair play to LiuGong for keeping it quiet in all senses of the word. We'll be back after this.
Merry Christmas and happy holidays, everyone.
Makes the most of her. She's going after this week. I probably won't get rid of her entirely. I'll probably just put her in a cardboard box somewhere and dig her out next year, assuming we're all still here next year. Jim just said, that's the way. Quick swap battery change. Yeah, totally agree. I think that is definitely the way forward. Yes, it does mean you end up with 2, 3, 4 times as many batteries as you're actually using at any given time. but no charging times. You just swap one in, swap one out. Nice and easy. We've got one, speaking of low emissions or no emissions, we've got one final film for you today. It features those fine folks at Mammoet, and it looks like
We have to take action today to be ready for the future. Because this is coming, we have to transition, but we have to also be smart to make sure that it's economical viable.
Yeah, there are some benefits with using electric equipment. The sustainability part, CO2 reduction, there's less noise, but it's also cleaner. You can drive inside, so you don't have the emissions inside a tunnel, for instance. And the nuclear sector, everything should be without emissions, so this can really benefit up there.
The vision with Mammoet, what we have is, well, we want to be smart, start small and scale up swiftly. That's something that we really try to emphasize within the whole company, because we have a diesel-based equipment fleet already for years. So we have to focus on, okay, where can we really implement change and where can we also contribute to a client? For instance, an electric power pack, an SPMT power pack, which enables us to perform really heavy load transports, zero emission.
We are now doing like a retrofit of an electric crane, 100 tons crane. The main benefit of retrofitting is that you can reuse the existing crane. And if you retrofit them, you can really extend the life of the crane and also the value over time. In general, I'm really interested to see if I can contribute to the reduction of CO2 within Mammoet.
We have to take action today to be ready for the future. Because this is coming, we have to transition, but we have to also be smart to make sure that it's economical viable.
Speaking of economically viable and also sustainability, Jim, going back to the LiuGong machines, excuse me. If you have plenty of batteries, you can charge them steadily with solar or wind power. It's a key point. It's a key point. I know we talk about the need for green hydrogen, but the need for green recharging of electric is a key part as well. Also, I think, I'm not an expert in this field, but my understanding is if you charge batteries slowly, you get a better life out of them rather than just constant fast charge. I think that depletes the batteries over a period. If anybody knows any more about that, please let me know. That pretty much wraps up the main part of this morning's show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, please do stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. And I hope to see you again very soon. I will be back tomorrow. No show on Friday. Quick reminder. Excuse me. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I'll be back immediately after this. I have a confession to make. I use artificial intelligence. Not a little bit. I use it like all the time. But I'm not ashamed or embarrassed because I use it selectively. I use it to research articles and video topics. I use it to create thumbnail images for my YouTube videos, something that is a bit of a pain without AI. I use it to summarize my videos and my podcasts. Could do it myself, but it's slow and I'd rather use my time for something far more useful. And I also use it to produce slideshows because, frankly, I hate PowerPoint with a passion. I draw the line at having it right for me, though. AI might have absorbed the sum of all human knowledge, but I'm still not entirely convinced that it possesses the requisite skills to manipulate language in quite the same way as a skilled human being. That being said, I now have an AI agent that acts as my editor, checking my work for spelling, grammar, and flow before I press the publish button. And I've named my editor Nobby, because most of the editors I've encountered over the years have been quite knobby. Nobby is my spelling and grammar checker, my thesaurus and language arbiter, my editorial co-pilot. And Nobby is the reason I'm reframing my thoughts on AI's place in construction in general, and in the cab of demolition and construction equipment in particular. Before we get into that, I'd like you to cast your minds back maybe a decade to when the industry belatedly recognised the true benefits of automatic quick couplers. They were sold initially, at least, partly on health and safety lines, but also on the fact that operators would no longer be required to stand in the rain while changing attachments, which most refused to do anyway. But there was an unspoken additional benefit that was perhaps bigger than keeping operators dry. The addition of an oil quick, a steel wrist, or a Lenhoff ensured that the operator always had the right tool for the right job. Suddenly, instead of trying to make do with a grab where a shear might be more appropriate, the operator can drop off that grab, pick up the shear, and be back to work in a matter of seconds. So what's all that got to do with AI, I hear you ask? Allow me to explain. Most modern equipment now has a software-based operating system in the cab. That system controls a multitude of functions. It monitors the status of things like fuel consumption, engine temperature, and much more besides. That system also allows the operator to dial the machine to his or her preferences, a bit like choosing the right tool for the right job. Only it's not. Dropping off an attachment is relatively easy. You just lower the tool, disengage the coupler, pick up the replacement tool, re-engage the coupler, get on with your job. Selecting specific machine parameters to suit specific applications, materials, or conditions, however, requires a great deal more brainpower. Operators have to go into the system settings, find the right submenu, select the necessary function, and change the settings. It is, as they say, a whole thing. Unless you're a computer whiz, you'll probably end up doing what most other operators do. Dial your machine in once and then never change it again. But what if those parameters could be handed off to an AI? And what if, rather than having to reprogram the system, you could just tell it what you needed? Imagine if you're digging in some pretty soft material. You've got the engine revs turned down to conserve fuel, and because, frankly, the material doesn't require maximum power. But then you come across some hard rock. With the help of AI, you could change your machine setup just as easily as you can change attachments using a quick coupler. Or imagine that you could do what I have done and have your own AI agent or co-pilot working to support you. For the first couple of hours of your working day, you're just straight digging. So you tell your co-pilot to set the machine for that application. But around about 11:30, you switch over to truck loading. Using nothing more complex than your voice, you tell your co-pilot to reconfigure the machine for loading duties. Then in the afternoon, you're processing steel. You switch from bucket to shearer, and even as you're picking up your tool, your co-pilot has reconfigured the machine yet again. Take it even further. I use Nobby, my AI editor, to find and correct my mistakes. Operators could do the same. An AI could monitor each activity and make recommendations on how productivity might be increased or fuel burn might be decreased. For example, reposition the excavator or the wagons so you're slewing through 90 degrees rather than 180. Need to know how to perform a new task either with or on the machine? No need to reach for the operator manual. Just ask your version of Nobby. In fact, if your version of Nobby is anything like mine, it won't just show you how to do a thing. It will then do it for you. Until now, excuse me. Until now, the balancing of AI and human beings has been viewed through the lens of either or. But what if we reframe that argument not as either or, but as well as man, machine, and the software between them working in perfect harmony and each enhancing the other? The history of construction is a story of human innovation creating tools that enhance, not replace. I'll do that sentence again because I missed the ending. The history of construction is a story of human innovation creating tools that enhance, not replace the operator. The quick coupler liberated the operator to be more versatile. An AI co-pilot potentially offers the next great leap forward by liberating them from complex system settings. That's not about fully autonomous machines eliminating jobs. It's about giving the operator a tireless, expert assistant that ensures they always have the right setting for the right job. By embracing that as well as mentality, we could turn a machine operator into a machine manager, achieving levels of safety, efficiency, and productivity the industry has only dreamed of. Now, I'm off for a chat with Nobby. I've got a cough coming on, people. This show could get very, very quiet over the next few days, but there you are. Your AI Copilot. Incidentally, just I will go over to the chat, but just on the subject of AI Copilot, Copilot is the name of the new Microsoft AI. I don't use it much. It's here, and when I'm writing, it does occasionally offer me bits and pieces that I need to consider. I don't use that much, but Gemini 3, ChatGPT, and a whole host of others. You'll see if you watch this back later on YouTube, when I've whittled taken mistakes out of my spiel and put it up. There's even some AI imagery and some video in there as well. So I'm using it to enhance what I'm doing. And it was kind of the inspiration for that article. You know, we do tend to think of, once we go to AI, everybody will be laid off, and we'll have these silent sites with no people on them whatsoever. In some sites, I'm sure that may come at some point in the future. But I think between now and then, that idea of man, machine, and software all working together for the greater good and for the benefit of the job, the operator, the machine, looking after the machine's wear and tear and what have you. I think there's something to be said for that. So let's go over to the chat, see what you're all saying over there. Good work, Mammoet, says Andy Darville. Great idea with LiuGong swapping batteries. That's Andy again. Chris Ford, swapping batteries is okay if you've got the room to maneuver and also store the one for charging. Yeah. Funnily enough, when we saw the Z-Grip system, made in America, but we saw it in the Netherlands. I think one of the things that I quite like about that is that it's a one size fits all battery. So you might have in the instance that we saw an excavator and a skid steer, both have the same battery, but one's kind of turned down a bit for the skid steer. But if you're running out of power on your excavator and you need a boost, you can actually switch out the skid steer and put it in the excavator, charge the other, and so you've got that constant going on. Storage space is an issue, although I think if you haven't got room on your site, a bit like attachments, we were talking about quick couplers and that kind of thing. If you don't have room on your site, well, that they'll just have to be shipped in when you need them. But surely better than having to stand around twiddling your thumbs while your machine's plugged into the mains, as it were. So yes, going back to all things AI, it's surprising how quickly I've adapted. It really is. I mean, ChatGPT sort of burst onto the scene about a year ago, and I had a bit of a play, kind of grasped the benefits, but didn't really adopt it wholeheartedly. I was still, if I needed to know something, I would go to Google first. But over a period of 2, 3, 4, maybe 6 months, I found myself using Google less and less and less, and using ChatGPT more and more and more. And the point I was making about Nobby, and I do genuinely call him Nobby, I've got Nobby set, and I basically told Nobby who I was, so my name, my job title, what I do. So I told him that I do a daily live stream, that I write articles, that I've been in the business for 36, 37 years, whatever it is. Told him all of that, fed it a whole bunch of information that articles that I've written in the past, live streams that I've recorded in the past. So it now understands how I speak. Not just how I speak, but how I write. It's picked up on the fact that I am quite sarcastic, the fact that I come from South London and therefore I tend to speak in a kind of a South London way. It's picked up on all of that. So I can literally sit here, bash together an article, really as fast and furious as I can, give it to Nobby, and then Nobby says, yeah, it's all right, but what about? And that's what Nobby does. It's like having my own pet sub-editor. You imagine that if you've got that in your cab. Now, I mean, I find it weird talking to the AI, mainly because my other half is in the house, and it sounds like I'm an idiot talking to a computer. But I do it sometimes. But imagine you're in your cab, and the examples I gave were very, very simplistic. But imagine you're operating your machine. You're in some fairly easy soil, earth, not working particularly hard, crunch. hard rock, and you have a bit of a poke around, it's actually, there's a batch of hard rock here. Nobby, or whatever you decide to call your AI, hard rock, set it up, and it will crank up the revs. It will make just make everything that bit stiffer and everything else. And all you've done is just say Nobby hard rock. Yeah. Andy Darvell says, which AI program do you prefer to use? I have ChatGPT and Grok. Grok is definitely quicker, especially at making and changing photos for me. Funnily enough, I've been using my first probably 8-9 months using AI. I was an absolute addict for ChatGPT, mainly because it was the first one that I used. I knew my way around it. Grok, I only came to about 2 or 3 weeks ago, purely for the same reason that Andy has said there, changing photographs, but also animating photographs. It's good at that. But I played around with Gemini 3 when it first landed, which was only about a week and a half ago. And literally from the moment I switched it on, it was like, oh yeah. And I mean, I don't know the last time I went on ChatGPT. I don't think I've been on ChatGPT since I switched to Gemini, because it does everything that ChatGPT did, plus some more. I used them both to design my motorbike for how I wanted to modify it. So I actually had a photograph of what I wanted to work towards. Really clever stuff. Yes, it is. One of the things, and I'm yet to sit down with a company that will truly benefit from this. I mentioned slideshows in there. Now, I realize, most excavator operators are unlikely to use or need a PowerPoint presentation. But I always found them quite hard because I didn't do them very often. I might produce 2-3 PowerPoint presentations in an average year. So every time I needed to do it, I'd have to go and relearn how to do it. How do I change all of that kind of thing? With this, I can literally feed Gemini, here's all the information I need to encapsulate. Now turn that into a fully illustrated 12-slide presentation. And it thinks about it for about 30 seconds and says, here you go. And I haven't beaten it yet. Every single time, it's absolutely spot on. I'm working on a thing at the moment about the Building Safety Act, and how it applies to demolition contractors. And I've got screeds. I mean, I've got literally thousands of pages of information on how it will likely impact demolition contractors. Now, within those thousands of pages, there'll be a huge amount of repetition. I don't want to read the same thing 20, 30, 50 times. So I've basically given it to Gemini and said, condense that down, just give me the bullet points, and then I'll sit down and write what I need to write. And that's exactly what it's done. It's made my life so much easier. Just to imagine, I mean, even minor things. Imagine you get in your machine in the morning, you start her up, and you say, set the heater, and the AI will check the external temperature, decide on its own, actually it's quite parky out there, we'll crank it up. I'm thinking ahead here, but imagine if I mentioned about loading trucks. Imagine if you really integrated that level of control. So, you're sat there, you're excavating, you're looking at your front window, you're excavating, you're looking down, your head's bent forward. But now you've switched over to loading trucks. What if you could say to your AI, to your Nobby, truck loading, and it changes the setup, makes the slew that little bit quicker, make sure that your bucket is above the level of the side of the truck so you're not clouting that, and it does all that. But at the same time, it raises your seat a little bit so you can see over and into the wagon. All doable. If we can elevate a cab, we can certainly elevate a seat, but all doable. But that part of from the point of actually getting a bucket full of material to the actual machine or to the wagon itself, super fast. Yeah, I mean, I know people like Komatsu have already automated that. But if we're truck loading, you tell it, there's the height of the truck. remember that and make sure we don't clout it. Right, from this point on, I will start here and I'll go to there. Do your thing, and it just cranks everything up to the max. So you're loading, you're loading, you're loading, and then when you're finished with your wagon and the wagon's pulled away, okay, another wagon's waiting. You carry on doing that, or actually going back to excavating, and it just calms everything down. Your seat drops, maybe the position of your joysticks alters very, very slightly. Excited to see it. Jim says, from a worldwide point of view, I honestly think AI will help shrink the world population over the next 100 years. How are you figuring that, Jim? How are you figuring that? I mean, I'm genuinely interested. I can't imagine AI doing away with shagging. How do you see it doing away with parts of the population? Listen, I'm intrigued. I used to, and I say used to, up until about 6 months ago, I used to spend my evenings laptop on my lap, teaching myself live streaming, because I came to this belatedly, didn't really know what I was doing. So I would watch videos on how to do certain parts of this, how to improve the audio, how to improve the lighting, how to improve the camera setup, and various other bits and pieces, how to frame things better, and all of the things. I wouldn't say I've got this dialed in. I'm still learning, but I have to say I'm spending almost all of that time now learning AI. How can I do this? How can I do that? And I have wasted an awful lot of time watching videos about AI, but when I actually come to implement it, when I actually get to sit down and utilize it, it has made my life so much easier. So much easier. Give you an example. One of the things I do with this show, I don't know if anybody's ever checked, but one of the things I do with this show, once this show is over, I download it and I chop off the bit with all the videos in it, and I basically start with my morning monologue. I take that morning monologue and cut it out. So the bit that where we all have a chat, like this bit right now, that becomes a file. So that basically is what will become the recap that we put on over on our Buy Me a Coffee website. But the middle bit, i.e. my morning monologue, I put that into an AI, and I say to the AI, okay, take out the mistakes. It does it. Transcribe it for me. It does it. Can you do a YouTube description? And when it does a YouTube description, it doesn't just say, oh, this is Mark blabbering on about some bollocks. It will actually say, okay, here's the subject, and here are the timestamps. So at 44 seconds, he mentions ChatGPT. At 57 seconds, he mentions Gemini 3. All of which I could just literally take that, drop that into YouTube so that people can find their way through my video. I could have done that manually, but why would I? Why would I do that? And then I take the other bit, the bit that will ultimately become the recap, put it into an AI. The AI turns it into a podcast. It also provides me with a summary. So if you go to our buymeacoffee.com/demolition news and you watch or listen to one of our recap episodes, the script was written by an AI. The voices are AI. The summary that tells you what's in that show is AI as well. I've basically handed off the recap to AI. Yeah. Going back to Jim's point about reducing the world population, because people won't bother to get shacked up with someone, and they'll have AI for company, and either just have a fuck buddy or get their kicks through AI. Do you know, I hadn't thought of that. I mean, I do have my my concerns with AI. When you are outsourcing things like your mental or your physical health, when I produce something through AI, a lot of the time, particularly if it's something quite in depth, it does end up with a disclaimer that says, AI information can contain mistakes. But because I use Gemini, it actually puts citations on it. So if there's a fact in there and I think, that doesn't sound right, you can click on the citation. Oh, actually, no, that's absolutely perfect. Would I want to outsource my mental well-being to an AI therapist? Probably not. Would I want to be diagnosed medically by an AI? Probably not. And I do wonder about the impact of that. My wife is an absolute nightmare for, I complain that I've got a pain in my knee, and she will go to Google and find, it's not just the fact that I've slept funny, or I've knocked it, or I've jarred it. I've got kneecap cancer. She always goes, and I do worry about the impact of that with AI. AI comes back and says, "Oh yes, you've probably got a brain tumor because you sneezed 4 times in a day." I do worry about that. It will become a antisocial norm. I think it already is. Do you know one of the things that the human brain's a weird thing, right? So I haven't got them by me, but I use AirPods. I've got an Apple, I've got an iPhone, and I've got a set of AirPods, the little white dangly things. And I will happily walk around listening to a podcast or whatever it might be. I'll take phone calls. Sometimes when I'm sat here typing, I'll have the AirPods in. So if anybody phones, I can just double tap it and I can take the phone call and carry on. And I'll go out. I'll go down the local, high street or whatever it might be, chatting away to somebody on my AirPods. And I think by and large we've become accustomed to that. I think we've seen so many people doing it. Going back to the big old Bluetooth headsets, and then down to the AirPods and stuff. I think we've grown accustomed to that. I have a new Rubicon I need to cross. I can have a conversation with Gemini or ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot. I can't, even though nobody else would know, I can't bring myself to talk to an AI in public. I'm sure it will come. It's a bit like, when I first started to do the whole video thing, I was very, very self-conscious filming myself in public, because you do look a bit of a Burke, you're, particularly if you're doing it on your phone, you're chatting away to a camera, basically. I'm here at Tokyo Airport, and it's, you do look a bit of a twat, and I was very self-conscious about it. But when you've done it for a while, and when you've actually seen other people doing it, it's like, who cares? Who actually gives a monkey's what I'm doing anyway? I'm sure I'll go the same way with talking to an AI. I just haven't quite convinced myself to do it yet. And here's a weird thing. As I say, when I'm here on my own and I'm actually engaging with AI, I'm polite. Yeah. I say please and thank you. When I'm typing a prompt into it, I make sure that it is punctuated properly and it's spelled right and it's punctuated correctly. I don't know what it is. I don't, mate. It's like I don't do text speak. If ever anyone's received a WhatsApp message or a text message from me, you will know I write it like I would be writing an article. It's got capitals at the beginning of sentences. It's got semicolons and colons. It's got full stops and question marks. I do all the things. I do exactly the same with an AI, even though I know the AI doesn't need that level of detail. It certainly doesn't need me to say please, and it definitely doesn't need me to say thank you. But I do it anyway. That's why you have a very noticeable difference when out and about and in front of the camera. Both are great, but very different. Yeah. I think the other thing as well is I wouldn't say I have 2 personalities, because that would make me a psychopath. But I know you've mentioned this before, Jim. I think one of the things that I've kind of eased into with this show is, let me wind back. When I write an article for the demolition industry, I kind of write it with a target person in mind. And for a number of years, funnily enough, I'll be speaking to him in about an hour's time. For a number of years, that target has been Adrian McLean at Armac Demolition, the president of the Institute of Demolition Engineers. Because, I mean, for a start, I respect the guy. Among demolition men, he's not particularly sweary, so I kind of ease back on the language. And I try. He's smart and he's knowing and he's understanding. So I in my head, and I don't think about it all the time, but in my head, I'm thinking I'll write this because Adrian would understand that. And would Adrian understand if I said that? Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe I need to turn that around. And so that's he's become my avatar. Here on this show, one of the things that I think we've grown into over the course of the last 5.5 years, when I first started doing this, and I do still refer to it as a show, it's the Breakfast Show, and I am broadcasting to thousands of people around the world. But in my head, I'm chatting. I'm down the local cafe with my mate Jim and my mate Andy and my mate Dan and my mate Gary and my mate Ken, and we're just having a chat. And it's now my turn to speak. Yes, I've got a camera and a microphone and a light, but actually, I'm just having a chat. So that's kind of my adopted persona for this show. When I'm doing the whole piece to camera, out and about, on a demolition site, at an exhibition or whatever it might be, I was taught very early on, long before I started this show, that you need to be yourself plus about 30% when you're on camera. So whereas I might say we're here at ConExpo 2026, which is a perfectly legitimate thing to say, doesn't exactly get you up, does it? And bearing in mind you've got to hook people in with your introduction. So my introduction, if I'm at ConExpo, is we're here at ConExpo 2026. You just kind of ramp it up a bit because it needs that. I'm not now talking to my mates. I'm talking to a TV audience. I think about this shit far too much. No, we've done that one. We've done that one. That's an hour, people. We've done an hour. Can you believe it? Flies by when you're having fun and drags like a bastard when you're not. That's me done. I'm going to do a weird one tomorrow. I'm not even going to tell you what it is because I haven't got it completely straight in my head. But I was stood there eating my crumpets this morning. I do a weird thing, right? Get up in the morning, make me and the missus a cup of coffee. That's my one and only cup of coffee for the day. After that, I'm on tea. My first cup of tea is accompanied by a couple of hot buttered crumpets, which I always eat standing up in the kitchen. We have seating. I'm in a seat now. That we have a dining room. We have a front room. I could sit there. Always eat them standing up. And I was stood there. That's a pointless aside. Stood there this morning, and I just suddenly had an idea, and I thought, oh yeah, that's got to be done. So tomorrow's morning monologue is going to be, as if anything in this show is ever on kilter. This is going to be slightly off kilter, but I think you'll enjoy it, particularly if you're watching the TV at the moment. That's all I'll say. That will do us for now, people. Until tomorrow, go and have a fine and splendid day. Look after yourself. If you do have a bit of an AI, send it my regards. And if you do have an AI that you use, have you named it? And if so, what have you named it? As I say, I was told, give it a name. And I thought, what could I name it? And I thought about naming it after people that I like and whatever. And I thought, no, every single editor I've ever worked for, with a few notable exceptions, have been knobs. So I'll call him Nobby. So Nobby is mine. If ever you do that, please let me know if you've got your own name. Nothing wrong with having a bit of crumpet standing up. Jim, I'll set them up and you knock them down. Well played, sir. Well played indeed. I'll be back tomorrow, 10 a.m. for yet more of the same. Till then, everybody, have a fine and splendid day. See you soon.